Okay. I think we're good to go. All right. Does everyone hear me? Welcome. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us for our part 2 ERAS event. This time with program leadership, we have a live panel. My name is Adam Ahmed. I'm a third-year student at the CUNY Medical School in New York City, and the chair of the research committee of the Thoracic Surgery Medical Student Association, also known as the TSMA. For our new viewers, thank you very much for joining us. And just so you know, TSMA is a nonprofit student-run organization founded in 2020 with a mission to help provide resources, mentorship, and networking opportunities for students with a passion for cardiovascular and thoracic surgery. We're lucky to now have nearly 400 members from over 43 countries. Welcome to our live panel event. And tonight we are joined by an incredible panel of surgeons, educators, and program leaders tonight. First, we would like to welcome Dr. Sara Pereira, who is a professor of surgery at the University of Utah School of Medicine and the program director of their integrated cardiothoracic surgery residency program. Welcome, and thank you for supporting yet another TSMA event, Dr. Pereira. Next, we welcome Dr. Betty Tong, who is an associate professor of surgery at the Duke University Medical Center, as well as the program director of their integrated thoracic surgery residency program. Welcome, Dr. Tong. Next, from the University of Michigan, we welcome Dr. Shinichi Fukuhara, who serves as an assistant professor of surgery and the program director for the integrated and traditional thoracic surgery training programs. Dr. Fukuhara, I believe, graciously agreed to take this call from Japan this evening, so thank you very much for fitting us into your schedule. We also are lucky to have 2 representatives from Cedars Sinai. First, Dr. Joanna Chikwe, who is currently the chair of the Department of Cardiac Surgery at the Smith Heart Institute, as well as the editor-in-chief of the Annals of Thoracic Surgery. Thank you for joining us. We also have Dr. Dominic Emerson, who serves as an assistant professor of cardiac surgery and the associate program director for the Thoracic Surgery Fellowship program at Cedars Sinai. Welcome, Dr. Emerson. And we have, we're lucky to have 2 residents join us from Cedars Sinai as well, Dr. Veronica Toro and Dr. Zach Brennan. Thank you both for making it on short notice. So just a quick overview for tonight. The committee and I will be sharing a brief review of ERAS and its major components before we transition into an open Q&A discussion with our panelists. We do have questions prepared, but we would love for this to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to ask any questions you have directly in the chat or unmute yourself during the open discussion. For our panelists, please feel free to contribute to all any and all questions and screen share any material you would like as you see fit throughout the night. Without any further delay, let's get started. So ERAS stands for Electronic Residency Application Service, and it is a standardized application by which medical students apply to participating residency programs. It is available publicly on the AAMC website, and its application components include a personal and biographical information section, a summary of your education and expertise, any professional licenses you might have, research publications, as well as supporting documentation such as your personal statement, letters of recommendation, and the infamous Misspeak Dean's letter.
Thanks, Adam. And like most things in life, thorough, meticulous, and early planning is key for completing ERAS. And so please be sure to familiarize yourself with the timeline of your respective application cycle. And here's just a quick snapshot of the 2024 U.S. medical graduate timeline. And note that there are slight discrepancies between the due dates for U.S. medical graduates, which is pictured here, and international medical graduate tests, which is pictured on the next slide. So just be mindful of these differences. Next slide, please. Thank you. And as you can appreciate here, the cycle's ERAS officially opened on June 7th of this year for both U.S. and international medical graduates, and will then close on May 31st of 2024. Programs can then start reviewing applications on September 27th of this year, again, for both sets of applicants. And the beginning sections of ERAS includes both personal and biographic information, including your name, your address, your NRMP match number, military service, and whether or not you would like to couples match. And notably, the biographic information sections allows you to share more about your geographic preferences during residency, including what coast or region of the US you see yourself wanting to train in, as well as if you would prefer a more rural or urban setting. Next slide, please. And the next sections of ERAS include education, experience, licensures, and research publications, all of which will be formulated into an ERAS CV that you and programs can then view. And this section truly allows you to share your story before ever interviewing in person, thus showcasing where you have trained over the years, as well as work, research, and volunteer experiences that helped develop you into the applicant that you are today, as well as any peer-reviewed published work to which you have contributed.
Thank you, Julie. So I'll be talking about the personal statement and the letters of recommendation a little bit. So of course, the personal statement is a way to showcase your individuality among a very strong group of applicants, as we know, to I-6 programs. It's also known to be the only factor that's by all responding programs to be in consideration for offering interview invitations, in addition to perceived commitment to the specialty and, of course, letters of recommendation. So another thing to take note of. Additionally, while a personal statement may not necessarily get you into a residency position, it may be able to break your applications. So you want to make sure that it's written well. Some tips for personal statement: make sure you have others who have gone through the application process, review your drafts, and when you're close to finalization, ask your surgical mentors, of course, to review this personal statement as well. And of course, last of all, be yourself. Next slide, please. So for letters of recommendation, typically you need at least 3 letters, maximum 4 though to one program. However, there is no limit on the ERAS website itself, so feel free to get as many letters as you can, as you may want to be strategic in terms of sending these letters to certain programs. You want to request these as early as possible, as surgeons are, of course, very busy. Research letters are also important, but you want to have at least 3 to 4 clinical letters as well. And if you felt that you performed well during an away rotation, or exceptionally well, I should say, then you should definitely ask for a letter there, as those could be less biased letters as well. And finally, get letters from faculty who know you, even if they have a great reputation, they aren't able to really write about you well, it may not be as impactful. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Andrew. So I'll be going over the exam portion of the application process. For MD programs, we take the USMLE Step 1 and Step 2. And as many of you may know, Step 1 is now pass-fail, whereas Step 2 is still graded. So it is now recommended that we take Step 2 before submitting our ERAS applications. For DO students, there's an equivalent COMLEX exam series. For DO students, you still also have the option of taking the USMLE as well, which is recommended for those applying into surgery. And on the right here, I've included the average scores of medical students who match CT integrated programs from 2021. And the mean was about 244 for Step 1 and 250 for CK. So next I'll be going over the MSPE, which was formerly known as the Dean's Letter. This is essentially a written summary of your performance during medical school. It is written by the deans of the medical school, and it's important to note that even for pass-fail clerkships, oftentimes individual evaluator comments are still included in the MSPE. So it is important to show up and do well in all of your clerkships and not just surgery. And when it comes time to writing the MSPE, typically around the summer prior to applying, the deans may reach out and ask for written information from you on what you've done during medical school and what you think is important to highlight on your application.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Alice. So if it's all right with everyone, I would love to transition into our Q&A panel discussion right now. Remember to put your questions in the chat as they come up, or unmute yourself directly and ask. And just to get us started, one question our group had for our panelists. Let me just stop sharing. In your experiences reviewing several ERAS applications throughout the years, what part of the application do you recall being a section where several applicants have helped distinguish themselves? Is it a very strong research publication section, or a unique personal statement with experiences descriptions, or a little bit of all of it? What do you most remember when from the ERAS when an applicant walks into interview?
I guess I can comment on that. Just a reminder, I'm Dom Emerson from Cedars. Having gone through a number of cycles of this over the years, I think it's really variable per applicant. There may be little icons that stick out for an individual, but having that something that's a little different that sets you apart really does make a difference, because we are looking at a ton of applications that are all really, really, really good. And so you do want to do things to separate yourself and highlight those things, the things that make you unique. I mean, not everybody's going to have this massive CV with a ton of research. So try to find the things that you're really passionate about that you can speak to, that kind of show what your character really is. And whether that's been, somebody in the past really enjoyed locksmith work, which I found really interesting. And I remember that when we talked to them on the interview trail, and it's just those little things that stick out for people that people like to highlight, that shows that you're passionate about something else besides just medicine.
The first thing I go to after I've looked at the front page and read through the personal statement are the letters of recommendation. There's a huge spectrum. Some writers that we see quite a lot will literally write 150 words. You don't really get a flavor of the applicant. Some will write a couple of pages, and inside that you can get some absolute nuggets. And it's the people that stand out in terms of how they interact with teams, how much they've been a pleasure to teach and work with. That are the people that you're going to be probably most excited to put into interview, and that you're probably going to fight to get. I think it's really valuable for us as an academic program to see evidence of scholarly work. It doesn't necessarily have to be research, although it tends to be that. That's a focus of ours. You're probably not going to get the full amount out of this program if that's not something that you're completely interested in. And most people that have come here have just got phenomenal stuff that's outside, and it doesn't necessarily have to be being at the Olympics. We've got Bhangra dancers, we've got surfers. It's just something that I think really speaks to having a life outside cardiac surgery too.
Yeah, I think those comments are great. We noticed this year when I was just looking over an application with one of our students that you're limited to 10 experiences this year. They've really changed the application quite a bit. And then they took off the hobbies section. And, to me, I always want to know what makes a person unique and what your individual story is. And so I loved the hobbies section. And frankly, our residents, when they had their little interviews with people the day before, would always want to know what people's hobbies were. And so we would give them a little paper of just names and hobbies. So I guess if you think about your application and what all program directors are looking for, I think just think about what really drives you every day and what makes you unique from your colleagues, and try to incorporate that somehow into your personal statement and your application.
I have a question from the chat from Rocky Gahaya. Their question was, how important is volunteer experience, in particular non-academic volunteer experience, for a surgery match?
I think it depends on the experience itself. If you're, travel internationally to volunteer.
No, the yellow one is open.
At a clinic, or I don't know, reading books or teaching English. I think that's, again, something that makes you unique as an applicant. But it's, from my perspective, certainly not a prerequisite. Again, it's part of the whole package, really, and what makes you an individual and unique.
We're also a step up from medical school applications here, where at medical school we were looking for volunteer applications experience because it was sometimes people's only experience of a clinical environment, and it showed a little bit of commitment. This is not that. You all know the clinical environment, so the volunteer experience really has to be something that I think is a really important experience. Just like you characterized, you've gone abroad, you've done something in terms of mission work, something operative, something a bit more compelling. And in terms of academic and research experience, a lot of that is obviously volunteer time. You're sort of looking for people that complete projects, so that it's not just time spent doing something, but it's actually sort of resulted in something material, ideally a presentation or a publication.
I would just add that whatever you put on your application, expect that somebody may ask you about it, and that you have to have something that is a good reason for you putting it on there. That the killer for applicants sometimes is that you say, hey, it looks like you happen to volunteer at, one guy volunteered at the hospital that I was at medical school, and I asked him about it. You can tell me a thing about it, and he clearly never really spent that much time there, and that is a big no-no. So really be, something that you've actually been able to have a good story about, that you can defend your time on, and why you did it and what you really gained from it.
I think that gets to the whole idea of being genuine, right? Don't try to represent yourself as somebody or something that you're not, because as Dr. Emerson said, that will come through in a minute. So yeah, I agree there.
Would you like us to pick some of these from the chat, Adam or Ryan, or do you want to?
Yeah, I'm seeing,
Some of
so
those questions.
just to go back to letters of reference, so Ramanish asked about letters of reference from other countries, and I think there's a few things that you can do to help your letters really help you. So most US cardiac and thoracic surgeons know how to write a compelling letter of reference, with the one caveat that I said is sometimes a super busy chief or chair will write something that's really short and not necessarily that helpful. So don't necessarily go to the person that's the most important person in the group that you've barely interacted just because you think that's going to resonate. Go to the associate professor or the assistant professor that you spend a ton of time with that might write something really detailed, and make sure they've got your CV, make sure they know your strengths. If you're working with people from outside of the US, give them a sample of a letter, because oftentimes cultural approaches to letter writings are very, very different. And certainly my experience based in the UK is we used to write two-liners and think that was great. And that looks like a sort of tacit blacklist type letter. So just be thoughtful. Don't be afraid to sort of gently coach letter writers that aren't from within the system. And when you're choosing, cardiac and thoracic is super helpful. Remember that you're probably applying for general surgery, so you want another set of letter writers for your general surgery application.
There have been a couple of questions about integrated versus general surgery applications. I wanted to highlight two. One question was how to navigate deciding whether to apply to both an integrated and a general surgery residency at a given program, and then also what obstacles to overcome for an international medical graduate to get into an integrated program, and what programs look for in international graduates.
Betty, how do you handle that at your institution?
Well, I was about to say, I think it's institution dependent. We used to, I mentioned this I was actually on the panel Wednesday night, and we used to interview at the same weekend for general surgery in our integrated program, trying to prevent people from having to come to our place twice. We no longer do that. Obviously, we're interviewing virtually as well. I think some institutions are very open and friendly to people applying to both programs. They're at our place, they're considered completely independent. So whatever general surgery decides how they want to evaluate and rank somebody is independent from the way we do. So I think I would ask and try to get a sense for what the institutional culture is like. If you are geographically bound toward a certain area, I think that's especially important to try to get figure out and navigate where you might want to apply in one versus the other if the environment is less friendly.
I can comment about general surgery versus integrated thoracic residency. To be honest, I don't think most applicants have any choices, it's just too competitive either way, unfortunately, for CT surgery. I mean, compared with 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was applying, today, it's unbelievably competitive. So to be honest, I don't think a majority of applicants have any choices. Just they have to apply both. Unfortunately, I think that's a reality. And then in terms of IMG, also, I think it depends on the program. I think many programs are open to accept the IMGs, but I think the visa restrictions are really probably the biggest obstacle. So most of the programs only accept the J1 visa. I think that each applicant, if you're IMG, has to search very well and then clarify. Otherwise, even after getting invited for interview and then considered to be ranked highly, then program side found out, oh, this person is IMG or needs a visa, H1 visa. We don't accept H1B. This kind of a thing can happen. Unfortunately, many programs are not familiar with visa system. That's the reality. So,
if it's okay, I'm going to jump to Cynthia Rangel's question, which says, is it okay to use the same letter of reference for both general and CT surgery? And I would say a strong no. I would strongly recommend you get separate letters. And that's simply because a number of general surgery program directors have been burnt by people applying both ways, getting general surgery and then bailing out in their first or second year to do I6 programs. So they are very, very sensitive to needing to recruit people that are really committed to general surgery. And one, and two, it actually makes sense because the skills that you bring to cardiothoracic surgery are different to the ones in many ways that you bring to general surgery. So going that extra mile to get letters that reflect those different interests and commitments, I think is really important. And for those of you that are applying second time around, new letters, never, never, never just use the letters from the year before. That I almost don't, those are almost straight to the reject pile because it just shows that you've made no effort, and it also highlights the fact that you didn't have the match you wanted last year. So fresh letters, really tailored to what you want. Can I just maybe ask Zach or Veronica, so they are PGY1s at our program and that went through this process last year. How did you go about really kind of deciding who you were going to ask for letters, and any sort of perspectives for the applicants this year?
Yeah, I can speak to the ISEC, the letters for the ISEC programs. I think I did a combination of like people, how you would call like people with big names, like I did a letter from like the chief of the cardiac surgery department at my institution, but it so happens that I had worked with this person since my first year, so they also could speak to like a longer term relationship. And then I had a letter from one of the institutions I did an away rotation at. I also spent all my time in that away rotation in the OR of the chief of cardiac surgery at that institution, and so I got those two big name letters. And then my other two letters, which one of them was a combined letter between a cardiac surgeon and then an engineer, were like research related with projects. And then there was another cardiac surgeon who also was research related. And these were all like assistant professors who like really I spent most of my time with like doing research, and they knew me very well. So it was a combination of people who could write longer letters, who like had worked more directly with me, and then people with, I guess, quote unquote, bigger names in their own institutions who I had also made a point to have them know me personally, not just like I rotated at your place. Can you write me a letter? Yeah.
So thank you. Dr. Toro mentioned sub-Is, and I'm wondering from the program directors on the call, how you view the fact that somebody's done a sub-I, where they've done a sub-I, and if they haven't done one with you, how that influences your thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I can say that I think sub-Is can go both ways for people. You know, it seems like over the last few years, there's so much competition to do sub-Is. And I think if you do a sub-I and you do an exceptional job, then by all means, it helps you in all programs. But certainly if you do a sub-I and you're not as strong as other students on your sub-I, it can certainly hurt you. And so there was a paper that was presented, I think at ATS this year, or it might have been at the Western, that they were talking about how they didn't feel that sub-Is actually helped applicants, and that, you know, they weren't encouraging more than 1 or 2 sub-Is, and I can't remember who presented that, but it's something to think about. I think that there's a really competitive program that you, you know, such as Cedars, you know, that you really want to go to, and you want to put everything into it. I would think a sub-I would help you if you do a great job, but I would just keep in mind that you have to really prove yourself on them to have it help you.
You know, Dr. Pereira, I think you're talking about a presentation by Omar Sharaf that is going to be published soon, so students can read it.
Okay,
that you
perfect.
reviewed, that you reviewed at a TSMA competition. So just FYI.
Well, cool. Did I speak correctly for what it showed, though, that sub-Is weren't everything? Students always worry about it doing so many, and it's so important, but
yeah, you're correct. Although I think there's a trend, and I think the impact of letters, which were very important for me. Omar's on here if he wants to plug in.
Yeah,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Sorry, I won't hog the talk.
Yeah,
So
we said that like basically the rate of doing aways was associated with favorable rate of interview offers, but pretty low rate of matching at a place where you did an away, which I mean may or may not be related to how you did on the sub-I or applicant factors that we didn't really necessarily measure.
I think one additional point, though, that I would like to bring maybe as a counterpoint or like as another viewpoint is, you know, I think there's 2 sides to a sub-I. I think there's you showing off for the program, and there's also the side that you get as an applicant about viewing a program and if you want to spend the next 6 years plus in that program. I'm speaking as someone who did 4 different sub-Is, actually 5 counting my home institution, and 3 of these were after interviews happened. And it was because I wanted to pick the place where I wanted to go. And so at this point, it didn't even matter necessarily as like in the point of like, am I going to get an interview? Because I had already interviewed at these places or had gotten an interview offer. It was more for me to decide, you know, and I think that can also contribute, you know, like if somebody got an interview offer somewhere and then didn't match somewhere, it could be both ways, right? Like the institution didn't like you, or maybe you didn't like the institution after spending a month there. And that was the reality for some of the places that I went to. So I think it can go both ways. I think obviously if you go somewhere, you have to show your best face. Like it's going to be tough. And as a medical student rotating in a cardiac surgery rotation, you know, it's not like rotating in medicine or something where you're like actively assigned tasks and actively contributing to the team. Like sometimes you're just standing all day and watching in the OR, and you may or may not get to do something. And the only way you can show, in some of the institutions, the only way you can show commitment is by just being physically present for like 14 hours, 16 hours a day, you know, and you just do it. You just do it for the whole month, and you observe what other people are doing. And it's not about you. It's about you looking at what the residents look like in their job and like what the residents' interaction with the attendings is, and you trying to visualize yourself in their position. It's not about what you get to learn or what you get to do as a medical student. It's kind of weird because like in every other rotation in medical school, therefore you're learning. I think sub-Is and cardiac surgery are a little different, and you have to understand why. You know, it's like you don't want a medical student operating on a patient who's very sick necessarily. And so that's one advice that I got from one of my mentors was look at what the attendings do with the residents, not the interactions they have with you as a med student, because like you're going to be that resident for the next 6 years. You're not going to be the med student. So
we've had a couple questions about objective measures now that step 1 is pass fail. How is step 2 being weighted, and what other kinds of objective measures are being used in applications?
You know, it's getting harder and harder. Right, because many core rotations are pass fail, or grades in medical school are pass fail, and I think that's where things like the personal statement and the letters really become important, because again, that's everybody's going to pass their rotations, everybody's going to have passed step 1, so it's a question of how do you distinguish yourself, and those are the ways in which you will distinguish yourself through your application. Curious to see what the other program directors think.
We've already kind of pushed that direction. I mean, as you mentioned, pass fail has changed the way that we have to look at grades. And so that was the kind of first part of that. And then now that it's going to be pass fail for the step, I think it does make it harder for us to really break down, people's own academic potential. But if you look at the value of that score, we put maybe historically too much weight on it, I think, because that doesn't necessarily predict future performance of that individual, other than potentially in some people think that it may predict their pass rate or their absolute scores in the future. But other than that, I don't think that it really tells you who's going to be a good resident. And that again comes down to, like you're saying, the personal statement, who they are as an individual, what their own kind of individual character is, and how they're going to respond to what is a very rewarding, very wonderful, but also very long and often challenging training program.
We've also had, my apologies, continue.
Oh, okay. Let me tell this very quickly. So I agree with everyone. I don't think the step 2 score is as important, but it's better to have a higher score, because if the score is too low, people start caring about it. But as long as you get the acceptable score, higher score, nobody cares. That's it. I don't think it's as important.
Thank you so much. This year, there's now geographic and setting preferences in ERAS. How are programs viewing those?
We haven't really even talked about it that much, honestly, because it's a brand new thing. I think that we're probably, please, I'd love to hear what other people are doing, because I'm not 100% sure what to do with it at this point.
I think everyone's a little confused. I actually got some emails from other program directors, not on our panel today, that were, asking what we were going to do with it. I think it was a little bit new for us, and nobody's really sure. I think in terms of the program signaling, kind of what's out there is that it really can help applicants have a higher chance of getting an interview at a program if you signal a program that you're really interested in. And there's been some survey results that have shown that program signaling can help international medical grads, as well as folks that don't have as high of scores, to reach some of the screening levels. And so by all means, I would say do the program signaling, because I don't think it'll hurt you. But I don't think that any of us really know what we're going to do with it yet, of people I've talked to.
Yeah, I think as Dr. Chikwe put in the chat, as we evaluate applicants, that they sort of go into a definitely should interview these people pile, if you will, well, maybe, and not going to interview these people. And I think where the geographic preferences and the signaling may come in is if we have two people in that maybe pile, if you will, that are pretty equally in that maybe pile, then if somebody has signaled to our program, then they may get that tiebreaker, if you will, or set that preference. So, but I'm glad to hear that the other program directors aren't quite sure what they're going to do with it, because I'm in a similar boat.
I applied general surgery last year, which had a geographical preference, and I've signaled no geographical preference. And I'm not suggesting that's what you do, but that's what I did. And I got interviews in Florida, New York, Washington, California, and everywhere in between. And so I'm not certain that it matters that much. And I've read some literature from orthopedic surgery that kind of agrees with me, because they've had it. I think someone published a paper on it from that, and they kind of agreed that it didn't matter that much, except for smaller programs that are probably trying to keep people in that area. So that's my take on it, at least.
To be honest, I'm surprised they added it to I6 at all, because there's like there's less than one program per state on average. So I think it's kind of silly, but yeah.
I've seen a couple of questions about research research. And thank you all for bearing with me as I ask some kind of rapid fire questions, just trying to get to everybody in the chat. There were some questions about research, namely whether or not impact factor of the journal matters, whether or not the type of research or the field of the research matters. How do you think that you approach and med students should approach research? Thank you.
My strong advice to, frankly, anybody talking about research is please do not do research for the sake of doing research. Please don't do it just to pad your CV. It's boring, it's unhelpful, it's not advancing the specialty. And if you don't love it, really, you've got to find a different way of differentiating yourself and demonstrating that you can complete projects, you've got a passion, that you care about the specialty. And there are other ways to do it. For those of you that genuinely have a hot burning question and a real desire to kind of find the answer for it, it's a brilliant way to demonstrate that. And then it's don't go for bulk. There are people that have spent a year out in research during medical school that we expect to see 5, 10 good publications, maybe more. There comes a point when more just raises questions. And it definitely raises questions when half of them are in journals, which is like pay to play, or journals that really aren't aligned with cardiothoracic surgery. So really, ideally, if you could get 1 or 2 impactful pieces of work in Annals, JTCVS, always remember there's JTCVS open, there's Annals short reports. That's something that every single surgeon that's looking at your application will kind of recognize. That implies it's probably clinical. So it's something that any surgeon who's interviewing can talk about. Some of us feel a bit nervous talking about sort of fruit fly genomics. We feel much more comfortable talking about 1 chest tube or 2 after a wedge resection. Think about that. And this is a very, very tough pool. We picked applicants that had papers in circulation. I've seen applicants that have papers in Nature. That really helps. You are probably pulling them out into your must interview pile. But always remember that the things that get you into the must interview pile aren't always the things that get you top of the rank list. And a ton of that is just how you come across interview, just in terms of you're trying to convince people and they're trying to understand, is this somebody I'm really going to enjoy teaching and training? And the reason research is important for our program is we just love doing it. We kind of love asking questions, and it is a joy to work with people that kind of, whose faces light up when you have an argument on ICU rounds and they want to go away and figure out, has anybody looked at it? And if not, how can we figure out the answer to this question? That's what makes this fun. And did I say Annals?
We've had some questions regarding the personal statement, namely how to balance declaring a specialty in your personal statement and what kind of experiences go in the personal statement versus in the experiences section. If anybody would speak to that, it'd be appreciated.
I think from my standpoint and from, I think, many others, I think for the integrated pathways, it's really important to have a vision. They're so highly competitive, and when you come for interviews and you don't have kind of like a 5-year, 10-year plan of where you see yourself, I think it just doesn't look as favorable, because we're all concerned that we have to train folks for, we're training you for 6 to 8 years, depending on research and the track. And so we really want people that have, and in our program, we definitely stress congenital and cardiac for our integrated program. But you don't want to go in and in your personal statement, or I think in interviews, and not have some vision, understanding that a lot of people change paths, but you kind of want to come across as being really dedicated and determined to go to an integrated program and to do cardiac for the majority of programs.
I think as to what to put in experiences versus personal statements, and I've read a lot of people's personal statements, both for med school and now for kind of for residency, is you don't want to stick in a bunch of experiences in your personal statement. You kind of want to write something that the person who finishes reading it takes away something memorable from it, and it helps to have some sort of cohesive story. I think humans are meant to think about things more in a chronological order. Okay, you put in something interesting, but then it's you know, like, this is the things that I've done, like, this is what inspired me, this is a couple things that I've done, this is what I hope to do in the future, or something like that. But like, don't pile it up with tons of experiences. That's more why you have like the separate ERAS experiences, where you can then just, for each like project that you find significant or something, or you can divide it by lab, for example, and like in one paragraph describe all the stuff you did with this one lab, because then there's a separate section for publications where you can put all the papers from that one particular lab. So that way you can fit it into the 10. But I think in your personal statement, try to just create something that describes you as a person and what you're excited within the field, not try to pile up more experiences.
It's also important to have multiple people read it. So, I mean, you're going to go through, I mean, I did it, a million different iterations of this before you're happy with what your personal statement looks like. But have a lot of people look at it afterwards and get different viewpoints, because you'll find different people see it differently. And the wording that you may think is very clear and says one thing can be read by somebody else a little bit differently. You really want to know that. And I've told other people before that it's not just like people like us that should be reading your personal statement. It's, I think, also good to have, I don't know, your mom or somebody who's not necessarily reading it for the same reasons to read it, because they will pick out, you know, the way it flows and these other things that really can help hone that statement so that it really is a nice piece of work.
So feel free to say no, but can I show your personal statement?
Yeah, sure.
You sure?
Yeah.
Sure, you sure?
Yeah, it's fine.
Right.
No one, this is recorded. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. I'm going to say that for me, it's authentic. It's really thoughtful. It immediately kind of sums up some of the things that I'm looking for, which is not just being committed to cardiothoracic surgery, but somebody who can work with a team and under pressure in a difficult environment. And when I say work with a team, not work to just further their own goals, but really further the goals of the whole group, understands that not everything goes your way. It's just a standout, one of the best personal statements. And sure, not everybody has had an experience that is that compelling, but you can also find really compelling things in the ordinary day-to-day. It doesn't have to be literature. There's a real vogue for it always to be kind of grab you by the throat, shocking entry. It really doesn't have to be that. But I think you're trying to give people a little bit of a flavor of how you are as a person. And what that really means is, can you rub along with people from all walks of life, whose goals are often really different to your own.
I think this discussion is excellent, and I totally agree with what everyone commented. And then I think you know, if you're a CT surgery applicant, you know, whether you are making up a story or not, you have to have a vision for the future. Otherwise, you know, people don't consider you. Unfortunately, you know, no matter how many publications you have on your CV, it may not be as meaningful. And then also, I think that on the personal statement, I think a little bit more focused personal statement being better than listing so many different things. And also consistency between your CV and the personal statement also helps to understand the person. You know, if we are just someone who's seeing you for the first time, this consistency helps a lot. So this is, I think this discussion here is excellent. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that thoughtful discussion.
Sorry, can I chime in one second? Someone had asked about the experiences, and I wanted to say that, you know, and Dr. Pereira earlier mentioned hobbies, and I wanted to say, because they've removed the hobbies section, I taught 3 different program directors how to do a magic trick over Zoom, including an I6 program director. So I think including a hobby that might be a little weird, like I talked about magic tricks, is something that can really add value. And I think if you use at least one of those experiences to talk about something you're passionate about, and Dr. Chikwe mentioned this earlier, something you're passionate about outside of medicine, people really like that. And I taught 3 different program directors in Magic Trick, but I talked about it at maybe 50% of my interviews. So, having a unique passion is really important. Yeah, you don't have to learn a magic trick, but something.
But no, I think if you think about, 20 faculty sitting in a room talking about applicants and making your rank list, and you say, hey, that's the guy that did the magic tricks, like it just makes you really memorable. And I think all of us like to sit around and talk about all the applicants, but when every faculty can remember one applicant, that's always really impressive.
So on the topic
sorry.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
I was just going to add that discussion that we have later, it's also, or at least for our program, it's also important when we talk to our residents, our current residents about that individual applicant, which we do for everybody. So I think all programs have you meet, do a meet and greet the day before, or the night before, whatever it is, which is now virtual. But that interaction is really important for us, our residents, to be able to say that they gelled with somebody well, or that they see that they could work with somebody is really important, because it's a family. It's a small group. You guys are going to be seeing each other more than your actual family on a daily basis. And so you have to get along with those individuals. And that the flip side of that is true as well. And as something Veronica was saying earlier, is that when you go to those programs, if you meet the residents, you're like, these guys, I can't spend another 5 minutes with them. That's not a program for you, right? I mean, you want to be a place that you're going to be able to see those individuals on a daily basis, count on them, and really, bond with them over the next 6 years.
Thank you all so much. We've talked about interviews a little bit. One question we've had is, what are the most important interview questions that applicants should be prepared to answer? And what are some things to avoid saying on interview day?
I have to say, by the time you've interviewed once or twice, there's very few fluffs that people have verbal diarrhea and say things that clearly they didn't really want to let out there. I think that the thing that puts most interviewers off, given that everybody is pretty practiced, you've met a certain bar, it should be good, is clear lack of enthusiasm. Like, you were just doing the time, you were not that interested in the program. I promise you that comes across. And one of the reasons we only interview a pretty small number of people, we don't feel like we've got to interview more people than there are match positions. We interviewed maybe 15, 16 people last year, is we really just wanted to interview people that we knew were committed to our program, that would be really excited to come here. And the 1 or 2 that got through that filter that you interviewed, that were just clearly there because they kind of wanted to rack up another interview as a just in case. It's just, so think about it really carefully. I know it's competitive and you really think you've got to get as many offers as you can, but you've got to convince yourself before you go in the room why that program in that instant is the one that you really want, internalize it, and then come out all guns blazing, because it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I think to follow that is like, you got to put the effort, like, especially like if you end up with like a bunch of interviews and like there's some that you don't know, like you got to do the work. You got to, like, at least the morning of, like, go through, like, pay attention, like, know a couple things about the program, because the programs, like like some of the programs that in your head might be like, oh, this is like safety or whatever, like they're going to ask you, like, why do you want to come here? Like that question like comes, and it's really, really awkward if you don't have an answer, like people will ask you, like, why would you want to move to like Kentucky or whatever, like wherever it is, like you got to have an answer, because it's going to become really awkward really fast if you don't like have anything to say about that particular program.
But I can clarify. So that's applicable for top tier candidates. But someone like myself, those days, we had no choice. We had to apply as many. I applied more than 200 programs. I only received the 4 invitations for general surgery non-designated preliminary. So that's the reality for some applicants. So, but I think that for those who are maybe top tier candidates, those comments are very important. Yeah.
But Dr. Fukuhara, I absolutely bet for those 4 interviews, you went to the website, you studied everything you could about those programs, and you went into those interviews being, this program is the one that I really, really want to be at. And genuinely, whether you've got 4 offers or 40, you just have to go into the interviews and project that enthusiasm, because the lack of enthusiasm has certainly made us sit in faculty meetings when we're going through the rank list going, they just weren't that excited about us. I kind of know that we're, just not there. And however good the interview and the application was, that's going towards the bottom.
Oh, absolutely. I think those who can get the many interview invitations doesn't matter. I think those are, comments are very important. But not everyone is like that. I'm trying to be on the other side where I was. So just, yeah. I think some of you guys understand what I'm trying to say, but.
No, I totally get you. It's like every interview is important because you don't know, like, even if you get many or you get few, like that might be the one place like that you get an opportunity to match at. So
and that's the other thing is keep an open mind. We all have very strong preconceptions of what programs are like based on word on the street and reputation. But genuinely, do your due diligence. If you can spend some time, do that. Talk to the residents, really look under the hoods. And I'm curious again, Zach and Veronica, like, what did you do to figure out, which programs were as advertised and which ones were ones to steer away from and which ones were actually way better than maybe the word on the street had?
I think I talked to a lot of residents at conferences. I feel like people are way more willing to talk about things at conferences. I realize that some people can't, financially make that happen very often, but trying to get an informal talk with a resident, I talked to a resident at Cedars on the phone for like an hour while he was in a foreign country, which says a lot about him, that he was willing to speak to me from a foreign country for an hour, asking about the program and things like that before I ranked Cedars where I did, and so I think going to those lengths are really important to figure out what's actually going on in a program. I rotated with some programs that I had heard were excellent programs, non-malignant. I showed up very malignant. And that's all the detail you're going to get from me on that. But I think doing your due diligence is very important. And also keeping an open mind, like Veronica said, when I interviewed at Cedars, I told Dr. Chikwe and Dr. Bowdish during my interview, I didn't think I would get an interview at Cedars, and I'm currently here. So, keep an open mind.
Yeah, I would totally go with keep an open mind. I didn't really talk to a lot of people before interviews. I literally just submitted all my applications. And then I didn't even know that this group of students existed because I had like a gap between my med school, like between my second and third year of med school, and then I was just rushing to finish med school. So I really didn't have a lot of people to like ask questions. And so I just went into all the interviews with a blank slate, open mind. Once you submit your application, you're gonna get information from programs. Go. You never know what you're gonna find. Like, I had never heard of Cedars before because I just didn't look at other programs. I was so stressed. I just submitted my application, and then I went to all the info sessions, and I went to the info session and I was like, I love this place. And I emailed people, I didn't hear back, and it didn't matter. I went to the interview, and then it kept happening. So I really, really, really like went with an open mind to all the info sessions, to all of the like student socials before surgery. It's gonna get like very exhausting, but you really have to like put an effort and like, like listen to what people are saying, because like you're gonna find stuff. Like I think I didn't really have that much bias because I didn't talk to that many people that like, oh, this program is X or Y, but like I was surprised by like some programs. Like I was like, oh, this program like really impressed me. Like this other program really impressed me. And like, so I think really do go in with an open mind and like try to like, not just like review the website, but also like really listen to what people say in the socials and like what they stand out at the beginning of the interview. They always have like a presentation, like just really have an open mind, because you might go in saying like, this is going to be my number one program. And like, as you go, It might not be. And I think the other piece of advice I have is like, while you're interviewing, and this is like probably one of the best ideas that somebody shared with me, was like, just have a moving rank list while you're interviewing, because like you might have an idea if you want to rank first, but like it starts getting like fuzzy, you know, because people will ask you the same questions in the different interviews, and then you have gen surge if you have that. And so kind of like keep a running rank list, because it's easier to say I like this program more than the program I interviewed with yesterday, than then go back at the end of like your interviews and try to remember what you liked and didn't like. So like every day that you have an interview, try to like re-rank the programs, and that's going to help you a lot at the end.
If we have time, and I want to be respectful of all of your time, there was one more question on just any advice for individuals who don't have a home program. Thank you.
I think really leverage the sub-Is, really try and get to other programs, because otherwise people are wondering how you know that cardiothoracic surgery is right for you. It'll really increase the people that you can draw on to write letters, and it's great experience. It'll really help you select programs. You might see programs that you thought were great that aren't so, you know, fantastic in person, and vice versa.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I just had a quick question. I'm a fourth year from PCOM. I just really wanted to follow up on that. You know, a lot of us that don't have home programs, like how are we supposed to show that commitment that you guys have kind of been talking about for so long? I mean, I had the opportunity to rotate for about 2 weeks, and I really felt like CT surgery was for me, but it almost seems difficult to convey that to someone when I've only, you know, experienced that a few months ago.
So
that makes any
STS, AATS both have medical student early career awards. Apply for them. That will get you funding to go to the meeting. Again, sub-Is, away rotations if you can. And I appreciate that's actually an investment. It's expensive, and there is a wealth disparity that's sort of built into that. But in terms of trying to set you up for the application, those are probably the best routes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chikwe, for that response, and to all of our attendees for asking the questions, Ryan for monitoring a very busy chat the whole night. This is always our least favorite part of the night, but we are approaching 6 p.m. Pacific. Actually, we passed 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern time, and we do wish to be respectful of all of our panelists' time. So there's no major closing remarks. I think we could begin to wrap up. On behalf of the entire TSMA community, its leaders and its membership, I just want to say, you know, thank you, Dr. Pereira, Dr. Tong, Dr. Fukuhara, Dr. Chikwe, Dr. Emerson, Dr. Toro, and Dr. Brennan for being with us today, being present, and you know, helping address so many aspiring applicants' questions. We hope to work with you again very soon. And to our viewers who are applying this upcoming cycle, best of luck to you, and thank you for being a member of our community.
Thank you, TSMA.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Great job.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.